He threw a black credit card at her like she was a beggar on the street. $10,000, Audrey. That should cover a month's rent for a tiny studio in Queens. Consider it a parting gift for wasting 2 years of my life. His mistress giggled from the corner, already planning how she would redecorate his penthouse. They saw Audrey as a helpless orphan with nowhere to turn, a nobody, a piece of baggage he was finally throwing away. But here is what Brandon did not know. The old man sitting quietly in the shadows at the back of that boardroom, he was not some random observer. He was not a janitor. He was not lost. That man owned the very building they were standing in. He owned the bank that held Brandon's loans. He owned half of Manhattan, and he was watching his daughter get humiliated by a man who had no idea he had just signed his own death warrant. What Brandon thought was his greatest victory was actually the beginning of his complete destruction. This is the story of how a $10,000 insult cost a man his entire empire, his reputation, and everything he thought he had earned. But the real question is, did Audrey take her revenge too far? Or did Brandon deserve every single thing that was coming to him? Stay until the end, because the way this story ends will surprise you. This story is a powerful reminder that you never truly know who is watching. The person you dismiss as worthless today might be the one who holds your entire future in their hands tomorrow. Never underestimate anyone, and never let arrogance blind you to the people who quietly lift you up. The conference room at Halloway and Associates smelled of rich leather, day-old coffee, and the bitter end of a marriage. It was perched on the 45th floor of a skyscraper in the heart of Midtown Manhattan, with a sweeping view of New York City under a blanket of gray rain. Audrey sat on one side of the long, gleaming mahogany table, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She was dressed in a plain beige cardigan that was slightly frayed, and she wore no jewelry, not even the wedding ring she had removed 3 days prior. Across from her sat Brandon. He looked exactly like the hotshot tech entrepreneur he pretended to be. His suit was a custom-tailored navy blue, woven from fine Italian wool. His wristwatch was a Patek Philippe, an item that cost more than a family car, and he wore a smile so sharp it could slice through steel. "Let us just get this over us with, Audrey," Brandon said, pushing the thick document stack across the table. The papers scraped noisily against the wooden surface. "I am exhausted. You are exhausted. We can both admit this marriage was a huge mistake." "A huge mistake," Audrey echoed, her voice soft but firm. Her gaze was locked on the word dissolution, printed in heavy black letters at the top of the first page. "Do not play the innocent one here," Brandon sighed, sinking back into his high-tech ergonomic chair. "Look, when I first saw you, you were a waitress at Luku. I thought I was saving you from that life. I figured you would be grateful to be the wife of the chief executive officer of Nexus Stream. But if we are being real, you never fit into this world. You have no idea how to dress for charity balls. You do not know how to schmooze with investors. You are just," he waved a dismissive hand, trying to find a delicate word but giving up. "Dull." The word came from the corner of the room. Audrey did not even flinch. She had known Jessica was there the whole time. Jessica, who was Brandon's executive assistant, was sitting on the windowsill, glued to her phone. She was 22, blonde, and her dress was completely out of place for a serious legal meeting. "She is just dull, Brandon," Jessica added, without looking away from her screen. "And her cooking is weird. I mean, who serves a pot roast to a vice president of marketing? It is so embarrassing." Brandon let out a small laugh. "Exactly. The bottom line is, Audrey, my company is about to have its initial public offering. The IPO is scheduled for next month. My legal team and my public relations people all agree that a clean split now is much better than a messy one later. Being single is a much better look than being married to a nobody when I am ringing that opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. Audrey finally looked up at him. So that is all I am. After 2 years of marriage, I am a risk to your share price. This is just business, Audrey. Do not get emotional about it. Brandon tapped his finger on the documents. This is the offer. Our prenuptial agreement says you get 0 because you came into this with 0, but I am a generous man. He dug into his jacket pocket and retrieved a black credit card. He tossed it on the table, where it spun for a moment before landing near her. That has a $10,000 limit. It is enough for a security deposit on a place in, who knows, Queens or New Jersey, somewhere affordable, and you can have the Honda. The lawyer beside Brandon, a nervous, sweating man named Mr. Gables, cleared his throat. Mr. Cross, the Honda is technically leased through the company at this point. Just let her have the stupid Honda, Gables, Brandon snapped, his patience gone. I am in a charitable mood. He turned back to Audrey and smirked. See? I am a great guy. Now sign the documents. I have a 1 o'clock reservation at Pearsay. Audrey stared at the papers, then she glanced at the credit card. $10,000. She remembered meeting Brandon 2 years ago when Nexus Stream was just an idea. He was constantly stressed, struggling to pay his employees, and living on takeout from the diner, where she worked part-time for fun, as a break from her studies. He had not saved her. She had been the one who listened to his business pitches. She had been the one who organized his chaotic life before he hired Jessica. She had even used her own personal savings, money she passed off as an inheritance from her grandmother, to pay for their first office lease when his initial investors backed out. He seemed to have forgotten every bit of that. Do you honestly believe I care about your money, Brandon? Audrey asked softly. Everybody wants money, Audrey. People like you, who have none, want it the most. Brandon scoffed. Just sign it. Stop making this difficult. Or are you hoping for some kind of last-minute rescue? Audrey took a deep breath. She reached into her handbag. For a second, Brandon recoiled, maybe thinking she was pulling out a weapon or serving him with a lawsuit. But all she produced was a simple, cheap, plastic pen. I do not want your money, Brandon, she stated clearly. And I do not want the Honda either. Have it your way. Brandon laughed. That just means more for me. Now just sign on the dotted line. Audrey removed the cap from the pen. She did not appear angry or sad. In fact, she looked relieved. Just as the pen's tip was about to touch the paper, the large oak door at the far end of the conference room swung open with a slow creak. A sudden hush fell over the room as the door opened. Normally, during a tense divorce settlement at a firm like Halloway and Associates, interruptions were strictly forbidden. Mr. Gables, the lawyer, shot to his feet, his face turning bright red. I beg your pardon, Gables shouted. This is a private legal matter. You are not allowed to just barge in here. A man entered the room. He was older, likely in his early 60s, with perfectly styled silver hair. He was wearing a three-piece suit in charcoal gray that did not need to shout its price tag. It simply murmured wealth. It was the type of custom tailoring where a designer label was unnecessary because the owner's name was the only brand that counted. He used a cane as he walked, not because he needed it, but as a symbol of his authority. He spoke no words. He just walked to the far side of the room, selected a chair in the shadows away from the main table, and took a seat. What is this? Brandon demanded, swiveling his chair to face the man. Gables, call security. Get someone up here now. The older man placed his hands on the head of his cane and looked directly at Audrey. His eyes were a stunning, icy blue, exactly the same as hers. I am merely an observer, the man said. His voice was low and gravelly, with an accent that was a mix of old New York high society and elite European schools. Please, uh, continue your business. Pay me no mind. An observer. Jessica scoffed from her spot on the windowsill. What is this? A reality show? Get lost, old man. Brandon, make him get out of here. He smells like an old closet. Brandon pushed himself to his feet, aggressively straightening his shirt cuffs. Listen, I do not care who you are. You need to leave. I am Brandon Cross, the Chief Executive Officer of Nexus Stream. My company leases this entire floor for our legal matters. You are currently trespassing. The old man did not even flinch. He reached into his jacket, took out a pair of glasses, and put them on. You lease the services of the law firm, Mr. Cross. You do not, however, own the building. And from what I understand, this building is the property of Caldwell Holdings. Brandon stopped. So what? Are you the maintenance man here to check the thermostat? Something to that effect, the man replied with a dry tone. I was informed there was a disagreement over assets. I find it interesting to see how the next generation conducts its affairs. Suddenly, Mr. Gables, the lawyer, turned deathly pale. He squinted at the man in the back of the room. He took in the silver hair, the specific style of the suit's lapel, the gold ring on his smallest finger. Mr. Cross, Gables hissed in a low voice, I suggest you sit down. What? Brandon snapped back. Just take a seat, Gables whispered, his voice shaking. Let him be. But why? Because if we make a fuss, the building's management could terminate our lease, Gables lied, sweating bullets. He knew precisely who that man was. He had passed by his portrait in the lobby every single day for the past 15 years. But raw fear kept him quiet. If he told Brandon he was being watched by Harrison Caldwell, the reclusive Manhattan billionaire, Brandon would just put on an act. And Gables had a strong feeling the old man wanted to see the authentic Brandon. Brandon rolled his eyes and dropped back into his chair. Fine, whatever. If the old man gets his kicks watching divorces, let him have his show. It is basically finished anyway. He refocused on Audrey. See what I have to put up with? Total incompetence all around me. Now sign it. Audrey had not glanced at the old man once. Her attention remained on the document. Are you absolutely sure about this, Brandon? Audrey asked him one final time. The moment I sign this, there is no turning back. I will walk out of this room, and I will no longer be your wife. You will have no more claim on me, and I will have no more claim on you. A complete and total separation. That is the absolute dream, Audrey. Brandon smirked. I have a meeting with the Caldwell Group next week. Do you have any idea who they are? Of course you do not. They are only the largest venture capital firm in the entire country. Harrison Caldwell is going to personally review my company for a $100 million investment. I have to be single. I have to be free of any baggage. From the back of the room, the old man made a quiet noise. It might have been a cough, or it might have been a stifled laugh. Baggage? The old man repeated. Is that how you refer to a wife? Brandon did not bother to turn around. A wife who contributes nothing to the partnership. Yes, she is dead weight. I require a partner who enhances my image, someone like Jessica. Jessica beamed with pride and walked over to drape her arms over Brandon's shoulders. Honey, why don't you tell him about our engagement party? Audrey went still. The pen stopped just above the signature line. An engagement party. Brandon just shrugged, showing no sign of guilt at all. Well, since we are making it official today, I did not see any reason to wait. We have already booked the Plaza Hotel for this Saturday. It will be a joint celebration for my divorce and my engagement to Jessica. We are calling it the event of the season. Think high society, investors, and the press. He glanced at Audrey, his expression a mask of fake sympathy. I would love to invite you, but the security team is working from a very specific list. A chill spread through Audrey's chest, but it was not the ache of a broken heart. It was the sharp sting of understanding. So, you booked the plaza, Audrey stated calmly. The grand ballroom, Jessica chimed in, unable to contain her pride. Only the best of everything. We spent $10,000 just on the flowers. How interesting, Audrey whispered. Her gaze drifted past Brandon and Jessica, finally landing on an old man standing quietly at the back of the room. The old man offered a nod, so slight it was almost invisible. That was her signal. He was giving her permission. Audrey touched the tip of the pen to the document. With a smooth and graceful motion, she signed her name, Audrey Caldwell Cross. She turned to the following page and signed again, Audrey Caldwell Cross. After signing the last page, she put the cap back on the pen. Done, she said, her voice barely a whisper. She slid the stack of papers over to Brandon. Finally, he muttered, snatching them up to inspect her signatures. Oh, God, that took forever, Brandon groaned. Gables, I want these filed right away. I expect the final divorce decree no later than Friday. He rose from his chair and fastened the button on his suit jacket. He took Jessica by the hand. Come on, babe, he said. Let's go get a celebratory drink. I really need one. He shot one last look at Audrey. She remained seated, her hands folded neatly in her lap. You can have the pen, Brandon offered with a smug grin, as if granting a great favor. And make sure you take your garbage credit card with you. He and Jessica spun around to exit. As they passed the old man near the door, Brandon stopped for a moment. Hey, Pops, he sneered. The show is finished. You can get back to your janitor duties or whatever it is you do. The old man remained perfectly still. A smile spread across his face, but it was cold, like a shark's. The show, the old man's voice, was low and steady, is just getting started, Mr. Cross. Brandon's brow furrowed in confusion for a moment before he dismissed it, turning and storming from the room. Jessica's high heels clicked sharply on the floor behind him. The door slammed, plunging the room into silence. Mr. Gables, the lawyer, was shaking so uncontrollably that his glasses slipped down his nose. He quickly stood and gave a deep, respectful bow to the man at the back of the room. Mr. Caldwell, Gables stammered, his voice trembling. I was not aware. Harrison Caldwell paid the lawyer no attention. He rose, using his cane for support, and made his way to the table where Audrey was sitting. Audrey did not get up. She simply stared down at her own hands. Harrison arrived at the table. His eyes moved from the signed divorce documents to the black credit card Brandon had tossed aside, and finally settled on the young woman. He called you baggage, Harrison said, his voice gentle. Audrey lifted her head. Tears started to fill her eyes, but she fought to keep them from spilling over. Hi, Daddy, she whispered. Harrison Caldwell, the billionaire who owned this very skyscraper, the chairman of the Caldwell Group, and the exact man Brandon was so desperate to win over next week, let out a long sigh. He reached over and put a comforting hand on her shoulder. I always told you he was a fool, Audrey, Harrison said, but I never imagined he had a death wish. Harrison picked up the credit card Brandon had discarded, the one loaded with her $1 million settlement. He examined it with a look of pure disgust. $1 million, Harrison contemplated out loud, for an heiress to the Caldwell empire. He casually flicked the card into a nearby trash can. Come on, my dear, he said. We have a lot of work to do. If he is so set on having an engagement party at the plaza this Saturday, then I believe we should make sure he receives precisely what he has coming to him. He believes he has the grand ballroom reserved. Daddy, Audrey wiped a tear from her eye. But doesn't Uncle Cyrus own the plaza? He certainly does, Harrison replied with a wicked grin. And I believe it is time for Brandon to learn that in this town, you never bite the hand that feeds you, particularly when that same hand holds the note on your entire mortgage. Harrison presented his arm to his daughter. Let us go shopping, he said. You're going to need a new dress for an engagement party. At that very moment, Brandon was trying to flag down a yellow taxi because the surge pricing on Uber was outrageous, a fact that annoyed him, despite his recent boasting about being a millionaire. Meanwhile, a procession of 3 black Escalades glided to a stop at the curb in front of the skyscraper. Audrey emerged from the building's revolving doors, her arm linked securely through Harrison's. The doorman, the same one who had failed to acknowledge Audrey every single morning for the past 2 years as she delivered Brandon's forgotten lunch, almost stumbled over his own feet in surprise. He knew that face. Everyone in New York City knew Harrison Caldwell. "Good afternoon, Mr. Caldwell," the doorman stuttered, hurrying to pull open the rear door of the first SUV. "Afternoon, Higgins," Harrison replied with a nod. He knew the man's name because his company owned the staffing agency that hired him. "Please make sure my daughter gets into the car safely." The doorman went rigid. "Your daughter, sir?" His eyes shifted to Audrey, the woman wearing the simple beige cardigan, the same woman he had watched cry in the lobby only last week after her husband yelled at her for being 5 minutes late. Audrey offered a small smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Hello, Higgins." She slipped inside onto the plush leather seats, where the fragrance of fresh orchids filled the air. Harrison got in next to her, and the heavy door closed, instantly silencing the chaotic sounds of Midtown Manhattan. "Home, sir?" the driver inquired. "The estate in the Hamptons, driver," Harrison directed. "We need to clear our heads and place a call to Cyrus. Inform him that I require the Pearl Suite at the Plaza to be made ready for Saturday. Also, tell him to double the security staff." As the Escalade smoothly joined the flow of traffic, Audrey rested her head against the back of the seat. A heavy silence filled the car. "I am so sorry I waited this long to tell you," Audrey whispered. I had to know if he loved me. Not my family's money, not the connections. Just me, Audrey." "And now you have your answer," Harrison said softly. "It was a costly lesson, my dear, but one you needed to learn. You wasted 2 years of your life playing the part of a devoted wife to a complete narcissist. You cooked his meals, cleaned his home, and secretly managed his company's finances. You went so far as to use dividends from your trust fund to anonymously pay off his first business loan." Audrey nodded slowly. "He believes some anonymous angel investor rescued him from going bankrupt." "I am not the angel investor," Harrison grunted. "You are. And next week, when he sits across the table to negotiate his public offering funding with the Caldwell Group, he will finally understand that his angel has arrived to collect on the debt." At the same time, across town, Brandon Cross was opening a celebratory bottle of Dom Perignon in his brand new office. The office, a modern space of glass and chrome, was designed to make visitors feel small. Jessica twirled around in his expensive office chair, a glass of champagne in her hand. "I still can't believe she went through with it and signed." Jessica let out a laugh. "I really expected her to put up a fight for the apartment. At the very least, the woman has no backbone." Brandon sneered and propped his feet up on his desk. "That is her whole problem. She is small in every way. Small mind, small dreams. She was a weight holding me down." "Just look at me now, Jess. I am single. My company's stock is skyrocketing. And in just 3 days, I will announce our engagement at the Plaza. It is the biggest power move of the century." His phone vibrated on the desk. The screen showed an unknown number. "This is Brandon Cross," he answered, his voice smooth as silk. "Mr. Cross?" a sharp professional woman's voice replied. "My name is Eleanor Strick. I am the executive assistant to Harrison Caldwell." Brandon shot up in his chair, nearly knocking over his champagne. He waved his hands wildly at Jessica, signaling for her to be silent. "Yes, Miss Strick, it is an absolute honor to hear from you." Mr. Caldwell has looked over your initial proposal for Nexus Stream, the woman stated. He finds it intriguing. He wishes to attend your party on Saturday at the plaza. He feels it will be an ideal setting to evaluate your character before he signs the funding documents next week. Brandon's heart pounded in his chest like a drum. Harrison Caldwell was coming to his party. This was his big break. The golden ticket. If Caldwell decided to back him, Brandon knew he would land on the cover of Forbes magazine. That would be absolutely incredible, Brandon managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. Please let Mr. Caldwell know he will be our guest of honor. He will be in attendance, the woman confirmed. He plans to bring a companion with him, a silent partner from the Caldwell Group who holds the final say on all investment decisions. You will need to impress them, Mr. Cross. They do not tolerate fools. The line went silent. Brandon shouted in triumph, the sound echoing all the way down the hall. We did it, Jess! Caldwell is coming. We are going to be billionaires. He pulled Jessica into his arms and spun her around the room. I have to get a new suit. I need the finest tailor in the city. And you, he said, pointing at her, go buy a dress that screams trophy wife. We must look flawless. Absolutely nothing can go wrong. Back at the Hamptons estate, inside a massive oceanfront mansion that was worth more than the entire economy of a small nation, Audrey stood before a mirror that stretched from the floor all the way to the ceiling. Her old beige cardigan was gone, replaced by a luxurious silk robe. Behind her stood a team of 3 elite stylists, flown in from Paris and Milan, who were busy arranging racks filled with designer gowns. No, Audrey said firmly, dismissing a flowing pink chiffon dress. It is too soft. That was the old me. She moved slowly along the row of dresses. Her fingertips brushed against the rich textures of silk, velvet, and satin. She stopped in front of a gown the exact color of a starless midnight sky. It was a deep, shimmering blue-black, with tiny diamond accents sewn into the top. The dress had a powerful, sharp structure that demanded to be noticed. This is the one, she announced. A very bold selection, Miss Caldwell, one of the stylists remarked. That is from the Van collection. It was designed for a woman who was on the hunt. A smile touched Audrey's lips. It was the first real smile she had shown in months, but this smile was cold, and it held a hint of danger. Exactly, she replied. I am not going there to celebrate an engagement. I am going to attend a funeral. A funeral, miss? The stylist asked, confused. Yes, Audrey faced the mirror again, her blue eyes flashing with determination. The funeral for the career of Brandon Cross. Saturday evening finally came, bringing with it a thick, electric feeling in the humid air. The Plaza Hotel, a legendary symbol of New York opulence on the corner of Central Park South, was lit up and glowing. A long line of limousines, 3 rows deep, waited at the main entrance. A crowd of paparazzi had gathered, having been tipped off by Brandon's public relations team about a major announcement in the tech world. Inside the grand ballroom, the atmosphere was one of unbelievable luxury. Brandon had held nothing back, mainly because he charged everything to his company's credit, fully expecting the future Caldwell investment to pay for it all. Enormous crystal chandeliers, each one the size of a small car, dangled from a ceiling covered in gold leaf. Waiters dressed in white tuxedo jackets drifted silently through the guests, presenting glasses of vintage champagne and silver trays piled with caviar. Brandon positioned himself at the very top of the grand staircase. Brandon stood at the top of the grand staircase, his hands strangling the polished banister. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Stop fidgeting, Jessica hissed beside him. Her red sequin dress was so tight it looked painted on, a flashy, expensive piece that screamed for attention. You look like you have done something wrong. I'm just nervous, Jess, Brandon mumbled, his eyes darting across the sea of tuxedos below. Caldwell still is not here. It is 8 o'clock, and the invitation said 7:30. Powerfully rich people are never on time, Jessica said, with a wave of her hand. Look, is not that the vice president of Goldman Sachs? Go on. Go talk to him. The ballroom was a feeding frenzy of Wall Street predators. Men wore suits that cost more than a car, and women were adorned with enough diamonds to light up the room. But beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of tension, a room full of whispers. Brandon spotted Mr. Gables, the lawyer from his divorce, just 3 days earlier. He was at the bar, throwing back scotch like it was water, his face pale. He jumped every time the main doors swung open. Gables, Brandon called out, making his way down the stairs. Why do you look like you have just seen a ghost? Come on, cheer up. Tonight is the night everything changes. Gables stared at Brandon, his eyes a mix of pure terror and something that looked like pity. Mr. Cross, are you certain you checked the guest list carefully? Of course, Brandon scoffed. Why do you ask? No reason, Gables muttered, turning his attention back to his glass. Just good luck. Just then, the string quartet, which had been playing Mozart, came to a jarring halt. The massive double doors to the ballroom swung open with force. A sudden, heavy silence fell over the entire room. This was not the polite quiet for a new guest. It was the stunned silence that happens when immense power makes an entrance. In the doorway stood Harrison Caldwell himself. He carried himself like a king, surveying his kingdom. His tuxedo was tailored so perfectly, it seemed to be a part of him. He leaned lightly on a cane, his silver hair shining under the light of the crystal chandeliers. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Harrison Caldwell did not do parties. The man was a myth, a recluse. His being here was the ultimate endorsement for Brandon Cross. A triumphant grin spread across Brandon's face. He straightened his suit jacket and started forward eagerly. Mr. Caldwell, I am so glad you could make it. But Harrison simply stood his ground, a silent statue. He turned slightly, extending a hand back into the hallway. The announcer's voice boomed, though it trembled slightly. Presenting Miss Audrey Caldwell. The name seemed to hang in the air. Caldwell. Brandon stopped dead in his tracks. He blinked, completely confused. Audrey? No, that was impossible. The Audrey he had just divorced was a nobody. He realized with a jolt that he could not even remember her maiden name because he had never cared enough to ask about her family. And then she appeared, stepping into the brilliant light. It was Audrey, but not the Audrey he knew, the woman who used to wear drab cardigans and apologize for taking up space was gone. In her place stood a vision of vengeance, sculpted from ice and diamonds. A stunning midnight blue gown clung to her every curve, with a slit so high it revealed heels that looked deadly. Her hair, which was usually thrown up in a careless bun, now fell in perfect, shining waves over her shoulders. Around her throat was the famous Romanov sapphire necklace, a piece of history worth more than Brandon's entire company. She gracefully took her father's arm, lifted her chin, and her gaze swept across the room, dismissing everyone until it finally landed on Brandon. She offered no smile, only a hard, unwavering stare. "Oh my God," Jessica whispered, her clutch slipping from her fingers. "Is that the wife?" Brandon felt every drop of blood leave his face. For a second, he thought his knees might give out. No, it is impossible, he thought. She is penniless. I gave her $10,000. The sea of guests parted before Harrison and Audrey as they glided into the room. The silence was so complete, it was almost painful, with every single person staring at them. Running on a cocktail of pure panic and denial, Brandon plastered a smile on his face and blocked their path. "Mr. Caldwell?" Brandon's voice cracked. He cleared it. Welcome. And Audrey, what are you doing here? Did you take a job with the catering staff? It was a foolish, desperate jab. A ripple of murmurs went through the guests. Someone laughed nervously. Harrison Caldwell looked down at Brandon with an expression of utter disgust. Mr. Cross, you appear to be confused. Well, yes, Brandon stammered. This is my ex-wife. I have no idea how she managed to get past security. She did not need to get past security, Harrison interrupted, his voice cutting through the silence like a thunderclap. She owns the security company. As a matter of fact, she owns this hotel. The champagne flute slipped from Brandon's numb fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Crash. What? Brandon could only whisper. Allow me to make a proper introduction, Harrison said, placing a proud hand on Audrey's back. You know her as Audrey, the woman you cast aside 3 days ago because you decided she was boring and brought nothing to your life. But the rest of the world knows her as Audrey Caldwell, my one and only daughter. She is the sole heir to the entire Caldwell fortune and the majority shareholder of the very venture capital firm you are begging for money from. The room exploded into a frenzy of gasps and frantic whispers. All around them, guests raised their phones to record the spectacular downfall. Jessica quietly took a large step away, creating a noticeable gap between herself and Brandon. Audrey took a step forward. The scent of her perfume, something rich and exotic, reached Brandon. Hello, Brandon, she said. Her voice was unrecognizable, no longer a soft whisper, but a smooth, confident tone that dripped with ice. If I recall, you wanted a partner who better suited your public image, someone with powerful connections, someone with money. She gestured around at the lavish ballroom, the stunned investors, and the terrified lawyer. Well, here I am, she continued, but I am afraid my appearance fee is quite a bit more than $10,000. Brandon's mouth flapped open and closed, but no words came out. Audrey, wait. Honey, I had no idea. You never told me who you were. You never asked, she replied, her voice cold. You were always far too busy talking about yourself. But the prenup, Brandon said, grasping at his last hope. We signed a prenup. You get nothing from me. From the edge of the crowd, Mr. Gables stepped forward, looking as if he would rather be anywhere else on earth. Actually, Mr. Cross. Le bum. Shut up, Gables, Brandon snapped. No, Audrey said calmly. Let the man speak. Gables nervously wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. Mr. Cross, the prenuptial agreement specified that each party would leave the marriage with the assets they brought into it. Since Miss Caldwell entered the marriage with, well, billions of dollars in various trusts, and you entered it with significant debt, the division of property is very straightforward. Furthermore, Harrison added, a cruel smile playing on his lips, since you used funds from your company, Nexus Stream, to lease the car she was driving, and you admitted on record that it was a gift to her, you have illegally transferred company assets. And you just admitted to committing fraud by paying for this party with company money. Harrison leaned in, his voice a low growl. I do not believe we will be investing in Nexus Stream, Mr. Cross. In fact, my daughter happens to sit on the board of the very bank that holds all your business loans. I believe she will be calling in those debts tonight. Brandon stared at Audrey. He stared at the woman he had treated like garbage. Audrey, he pleaded, his voice shaking. Please, it was all a mistake. Jessica was nothing to me. I was under a lot of stress. We can work this out. We can get married again. Right here, right now. Everyone is here to see it. Audrey looked at him, and for a fleeting moment, Brandon saw a flash of what might have been pity in her eyes. Then she laughed, a sound that was light and musical. Renew our vows? She repeated. Oh, Brandon, I did not come here to remarry you. I came here to ruin you. She turned to the bandleader. Play something cheerful, she commanded. I suddenly feel like dancing. As the music started up again, Brandon stood frozen amidst the shards of his broken glass. He watched as the woman he now realized he loved, and the fortune he always craved, was swept away into the arms of a handsome man. The trap had been sprung, and he was the vermin caught inside. The lively waltz filled the grand ballroom, a joyful sound that was a horrifying contrast to the utter ruin unfolding in the middle of the dance floor. For Brandon Cross, his entire world had just shattered into a million pieces. Only 10 minutes earlier, he had felt like the king of New York City. Now he was nothing more than the court jester. He stood paralyzed as the crowd literally pulled away from him. In this world, failure was like a disease, and no one wanted to get too close to the man who had just dumped a Caldwell heiress for his secretary. Brandon, a voice hissed next to him. It was Jessica. He turned, desperate for a friendly face. Jess, listen to me. We have to spin this. We will tell everyone I knew the whole time that it was a strategic move for tax reasons. Jessica stared at him as if he were a bug she was about to crush. Her eyes were not on him, though. They were looking past him, at Audrey, laughing on the dance floor. She was staring at the diamonds around Audrey's neck. You idiot, Jessica spat. You are an absolute fool. What? Honey, we are a team, Brandon pleaded, reaching for her. She yanked her arm back as if his touch burned her. Do not you touch me. You told me she was some waitress, a nobody. You made me look like an idiot in front of Harrison Caldwell. I did not know. That is even worse, Jessica shrieked, her voice cutting through the waltz music. You were married to her for 2 years and you did not have a clue she was a billionaire? You are not a brilliant CEO, Brandon. You are a blind, pathetic loser. With that, she ripped the engagement ring from her finger, the 3-carat diamond he had just put on his credit card yesterday, and threw it at his chest. We are done. Do not ever call me again. I need to find someone who can actually pay for my ride home. Jessica turned and stormed through the crowd toward the bar, where she immediately started talking to a vice president from J.P. Morgan. Brandon was completely alone. The ring hit him and clattered to the floor, rolling out of sight. He did not even look for it. A moment later, a circle of men closed in around him. They were not friends offering support. They were the wolves he had invited into his den. Cross. The voice belonged to Simon Trent, one of his key angel investors. Is it true? Is Harrison Caldwell holding the paper on our Series B funding? Simon, please let me explain. Trent's voice was like gravel. I do not want your explanations. I want my money out. If Harrison Caldwell is coming after you, this company is toast. I am activating the clawback clause this evening. You cannot do that, Brandon choked out. That will drain our operating funds dry. Just watch me, Trent sneered and took out his phone. I am calling my lawyers. Another man approached. It was a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, the very one Brandon had pleaded with to attend. Mr. Cross, the journalist said, raising a small voice recorder, do you have any comment on the speculation that you used company money to cover your mistress's rent? Miss Caldwell brought up a forensic audit. No comment. Get that thing away from me. Brandon slapped at the device. Putting your hands on a reporter, the man smirked. That is going to read perfectly in the Sunday paper. CEO has a public meltdown at his ex-wife's celebration. From the balcony overlooking the ballroom, Harrison Caldwell and Audrey observed the chaos unfolding below. A waiter appeared with fresh champagne. It is almost savage, Harrison remarked with a sip, as he watched them tear Brandon to pieces. He craved the spotlight, Audrey said. Her voice was flat, without a trace of sympathy. He always wanted all eyes on him. I simply gave him his wish. She glanced down at Brandon. He was sweating, yelling at an investor, his tie askew, and his face was a deep shade of purple from pure rage. He looked so small. Did you ever really love him? Harrison asked softly. Audrey paused for a moment. She watched Brandon shove a waiter who was only trying to offer him some water. I was in love with the person I thought he was, she replied. I loved the man who would eat grilled cheese with me at 2 in the morning, talking about how he would change the world with technology. But that man was never real. He was nothing more than an actor looking for a bigger audience. Well, Harrison said, turning from the railing, the show is over? Let us go, my dear. I think the board of directors at the bank has an emergency meeting tomorrow morning at 8 to go over the foreclosure of Nexus Stream. Foreclosure? Audrey's eyebrow went up. Oh, absolutely, Harrison gave a dark smile. He was late on a payment 3 months ago. We let it go because, he was family. That special treatment is over. 3 weeks later, New York City was showing no mercy. In November, the wind howled through the concrete canyons, bringing a cold rain that soaked his cheap coat in seconds. Brandon Cross stood before the massive glass headquarters of the Caldwell Group. His expensive Italian wool suit, sold off to a second-hand shop, was gone. He now wore a generic raincoat he had picked up from a pharmacy. He appeared a decade older. His face was haggard and unshaven, with empty eyes. His collapse had been fast and complete. The morning after the disaster at the plaza, the SEC opened an investigation into his handling of corporate money. The Nexus Stream board had fired him before noon. By 2 in the afternoon, the bank was calling in all his personal loans. His penthouse was gone. His car was taken back. They even froze his credit cards. He was now staying on his friend Mark's couch in Jersey City. But just this morning, Mark said he needed to be out by the weekend because he was killing the mood. Brandon glanced at his watch. It was a cheap plastic watch. 12:30 in the afternoon. He knew she would be coming out. Her lunch was always at 12:30. He had managed to remember that detail. The revolving doors began to turn. Brandon's heart jumped. A crowd of executives emerged, sharing a laugh, and right in the middle of them was Audrey. She looked absolutely stunning. She had on a stylish cream-colored suit. Her hair was perfectly blown out. She was looking at a tablet and speaking with a man who could have been a senator. Brandon lunged, Audrey. The security guards near the entrance moved at once, instinctively reaching for their belts. All they saw was a frantic, shabby-looking man yelling at the Caldwell heiress. "Ma'am, stay back," one of the guards ordered. Audrey paused. She looked up and finally saw him. She gave a small wave to the guards. "It is all right, Frank. I know who he is." The guards paused, then moved aside, creating a barrier between Audrey and the street, with a 5-foot space between them. Brandon approached the line, rain dripping from his nose. "Audrey," he said, out of breath, "I have been trying to reach you. You changed your number." "I did," she replied calmly. "How have you been, Brandon?" "How have I been?" Brandon let out a laugh, a sharp, hysterical noise. "I am finished, Audrey. They took it all, the business, the apartment. I have exactly $40 left." $40? "I can recall having $40, Audrey said evenly, back when I was 19 and living in a dorm, refusing to use my father's money because I wanted to see what the real world was like. It really builds character, do not you think? Just stop it, Brandon shouted, but then dropped his voice when he saw people on the sidewalk staring. "Look, I understand. You wanted to give me a lesson." "Well, lesson learned. Okay, you have humbled me. I am sorry. I was an arrogant jerk. But this is just too much. You do not get to ruin a man's life over a bad breakup." "I did not ruin your life, Brandon," Audrey stated. I just stopped propping it up. Propping it up? Who do you imagine talked the landlord into giving you an extra 3 months on the office lease when you were just starting? Audrey questioned. That was me. I gave him cash from my grandmother's trust fund. And who do you think overhauled your pitch deck right before the Series A funding round? Me. I rebuilt your entire financial model from scratch while you were asleep. Brandon just blinked. You did the model? Yes. And who was the one who got the editors at TechCrunch to give you a look for that first big article? Audrey took a step closer, her gaze like steel. I was never just some waitress, Brandon. I was your partner. I was the engine in your beat-up little car, making sure it kept running. You just never cared enough to check under the hood. Brandon's shoulders sagged. The rain felt cold, but this truth was much colder. It hit him with a nauseating force that she was right. Every single lucky break he had gotten in the past 2 years, Audrey was there, somewhere in the background, smiling, handing him a coffee, and telling him, "It is all going to work out." He had mistaken her quiet competence for being invisible. "I need help, Audrey," Brandon whispered, his ego finally crumbling into dust. "I have nowhere else to turn. Nobody will even consider hiring me. My name is toxic in this town. Please just give me a loan or a job. I will clean the floors. Anything." Audrey just looked at him. She looked at the man who had tossed a credit card at her and told her to get an apartment in Queens. She reached into her handbag. Brandon held his breath. Was she about to give him a check? Or a key to a new place? She took out a business card. It was simple and white, with just a phone number printed on it. "This is the number for a recruitment company in Ohio," she told him, holding it out to him. "They specialize in placing people in entry-level sales jobs. It is respectable work. You will get a base salary plus commission. The cost of living is low in Ohio." Brandon just stared at the card. "Ohio, entry-level sales. It is a new beginning, Brandon," she said, her tone softening ever so slightly. "This city swallowed you whole. Maybe in a new place where nobody knows your name, you can figure out how to be a person again, and not just a CEO." She started to leave. "Audrey," he called, out one final time. She paused, but did not look back. "Did you ever really love me?" he asked. "Or was I just some project to you?" Audrey saw her own reflection in the building's glass doors, the very building she was destined to run one day. "I loved you enough to shrink myself so you could feel like a giant," she said. "But I love myself more than enough to stop making myself small." She walked right through the revolving doors and disappeared into the lobby's warmth. Brandon was left alone in the rain. He glanced down at the business card. Midwest Auto Sales and Solutions. He looked up at the skyscraper that vanished into the gray mist. In that moment, he realized the gap between them was more than just some glass and a few security guards. It was an entire universe. He slipped the card into his pocket, pulled his collar up to block the wind, and started the long walk toward the bus station. 2 years went by after that rainy afternoon in front of the Caldwell Tower. New York City, as always, had moved on. The whole scandal about Nexus Stream's collapse was now a minor story in the business papers, a classic warning taught in business schools about the risks of too much debt and underestimating your partner. In the penthouse office of the Caldwell Group, Audrey was seated at the huge oak desk that had once been her father's. Harrison Caldwell had officially retired 6 months ago to his vineyard in Tuscany, leaving his entire empire in Audrey's capable hands. She was not the same woman who had sat in that drab conference room in a plain beige sweater. This woman was sharper and much stronger. Her hair was now in a stylish bob, and she wore a tailored emerald suit that spoke of authority. She was in the middle of reviewing quarterly grants for the foundation when her assistant, a young man named Leo, knocked gently on her door. "Miss Caldwell, Leo announced. "The mail is here. It is mostly the usual, but there is one personal envelope. It does not have a return address, but it has a postmark from Columbus in Ohio." Audrey stopped cold. Her pen froze just above the page. "Ohio. You can leave it, Leo. Thank you." Once the door clicked shut, Audrey stared at the envelope. It was made of cheap white paper. The handwriting looked familiar, but it was not the arrogant, hurried scrawl of a CEO. It was a much tidier and more careful hand. She reached for her silver letter opener and slid it open. Inside, there was no letter, no lengthy apology, and no excuses. There was just a single cashier's check. Pay to the order of Audrey Caldwell. The amount written was for $10,000. Audrey stared at the number. $10,000. That was the precise amount Brandon had thrown on the mahogany table during their divorce. His idea of a severance package. She flipped the check over. On the back, written in small blue ink, was a simple note. For the Honda and for the lesson. Audrey finally released a breath she had not realized she was holding. She leaned back into her chair and closed her eyes. Model, in his mind, the New York City skyline dissolved, giving way to the sight of a snow-blanketed car lot deep in the Midwest. 500 miles away, on the dreary edge of Columbus, Ohio, the wind howled relentlessly. Brandon Cross warmed his cupped hands with his breath and stamped his boots clean of snow. He wore a heavy parka with Midwest Auto Sales stitched over the heart. "Hey, Cross," his manager, a gruff man named Big Tony, hollered from the warmth of the office. "You have a customer on the lot looking at the used sedans." "I am on it," Tony Brandon called in reply. He jogged out into the biting cold. The arrogant swagger he once had was long gone. His walk was now deliberate and humble. He made his way to a young couple who were shivering next to a line of cars. They looked absolutely petrified, and he could tell they were buying their first car, likely stressed about credit scores and how much money to put down. "Afternoon, folks," Brandon said, offering a warm smile that genuinely reached his eyes these days. "It is a cold one. Are you looking for something dependable that is also affordable?" "Yeah," the young man replied nervously. "We just do not have a lot of money. We need something to get to our jobs." "I understand completely," Brandon nodded. "I know exactly what it is like to start from scratch. Let me show you this Civic right here. It has very low mileage, and I can talk to our finance guy about getting you a monthly payment that you can handle. We are here to help, not to take advantage of you." As he guided them toward the car, a flashy red convertible screeched into the dealership. It was completely out of place in the grayness of winter. It was loud, obnoxious, and screamed money. The driver's side door flew open, and a woman climbed out. She had on a fur coat that looked tacky and fake, with heels that were already digging into the slushy snow. It was Jessica. Brandon froze on the spot. He had not laid eyes on her in 2 years, not since the day she had hurled the engagement ring at him at the plaza. She appeared older and more cynical. She wore too much makeup in a failed attempt to hide her stress lines. She noticed him, and a smirk formed on her face as she strutted over. "Well, well," she said with a laugh, her eyes scanning his work parka. "Look what we have here. The great Brandon Cross, pushing cheap cars in the middle of nowhere." Brandon excused himself from the young couple. "Please give me one moment, folks," he said, then walked to face her. He did not feel that old spark of anger. All he felt was a wave of pity. "Hello, Jessica. What brings you to Ohio?" "I am visiting family," she lied without missing a beat. "I heard you were around here and thought I would see how you are doing." She gave him a slow look from head to toe, licking her lips. "You know, Brandon, New York is so dull, and I finally dumped that banker. He was a real cheapskate. Maybe, just maybe, we could get a drink. For old time's sake, I am sure you get pretty lonely out here. She moved in closer, her hand reaching for the zipper on his jacket. We were great together, Brandon. We were a real power couple. Maybe we could find a way out of this place together. Brandon glanced down at her hand. He remembered how fast she had turned her back on him when his wealth disappeared. He recalled the deep humiliation. He gently took her hand and guided it away from his coat. I am not lonely, Jessica, Brandon said in a low voice. He turned and gestured toward the dealership's main window. Inside, a woman sat at the reception counter. She was not a model, and she certainly was not rich. Her name was Sarah, and she was the receptionist. With brown hair and a friendly smile, she was busy knitting a scarf. She glanced up, caught Brandon's eye, and gave him a happy wave. Brandon waved right back. I already have everything I need, Brandon explained to Jessica, and I have customers who are waiting. They are people who need help, not someone putting on an act. Jessica sneered, her pride obviously stung. You are a complete nobody. Maybe so, Brandon shrugged, but at least I have a clear conscience. He turned his back on her for good and went back to the couple standing by the Civic. Sorry about that, Brandon told them. Just a ghost from the past. Now, let me show you the trunk space on this beauty. While he explained the warranty, he felt a sense of peace in his chest that he had not known in years. He had mailed the check that morning. It had taken him 2 full years of saving every single commission, living on instant noodles, and renting a tiny studio apartment to finally put together $10,000. He was penniless again, but his debt was finally settled. Back in New York City, Audrey answered the phone. Finance department, she said. Yes, Miss Caldwell. I am sending down a check for $10,000. Please deposit it into the Second Chance Scholarship Fund. Of course. Should we include the name of the donor? Audrey gave the check one final look before she dropped it in the outbox tray. She thought about the man she had married, a man who once wanted to own the world, and who had finally realized that the world is not something to be conquered, but something to be earned. List the donor as anonymous, Audrey said. She got up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. The sun was disappearing behind Central Park, covering the city in a golden light. The anger was gone. The universe had finally balanced its books. He had lost the millions he never should have had. But maybe, out there in the Ohio snow, he had found the soul that he had lost along the way. Audrey smiled, touched the cool glass of the window, and whispered to the city below. The score is settled, Brandon. We are finally square. She turned the lights off in her office and walked out the door, ready to go meet her father for dinner. She walked with her head held high, not because of her billions, but because she knew her own worth. And this time, nobody would ever make the mistake of underestimating her again. And that is the story of how a $10,000 severance check cost a man his entire empire. But maybe, just maybe, it helped him buy back his own humanity. It is a powerful reminder that in life, you never really know who is paying attention in the background. Brandon thought he was just signing divorce papers with a woman who had no power, but what he was really doing was signing his own resignation from the good life. So, what do you think? Did Audrey take her revenge at the plaza a step too far? Or did Brandon get precisely what was coming to him? And do you believe that Brandon's repayment of the $10,000 is enough for him to be forgiven? I would genuinely love to hear your opinions in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this tale of karma, betrayal, and redemption, please go ahead and smash that like button. Share this video with a friend who appreciates a good drama, and subscribe to the channel with your notifications on so you will not miss a single new story. Thanks for tuning in. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful stories and valuable life lessons. Thank you for being part of our community.